Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back once again to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and a special warm welcome to the influx of new listeners who've joined us. According to my podcast stats, there's quite a few new people out there, so a big warm welcome. Grab a seat, make yourself comfortable, and rest assured there are no cliques here on this podcast. We all just listen and learn from each other. And I'm also looking forward to getting to know you all a little bit better over the coming days, weeks, months and years. And if I'm ever allowed to fly again, we might just share a hot coffee or cold beer together one day. That's what this podcast is all about. Now, today, I've invited Gregor Stirling, VP of Market Insights at a location marketing company called Uberall, onto the podcast today. And he's a digital marketing and search expert who's going to speak about how businesses can adapt in a post-pandemic world. So we'll talk about what SMBs should be doing and what multi-location brands should be doing to weather this crisis. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to California so we can speak with Greg Stirling, VP of Marketing Insights at Uberall. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Happy to be here. My name is Greg Stirling. I'm the VP of Market Insights for Uberall. And in that role, I create content. I do a bit of strategy. I oversee some of the data collection and support the marketing folks in a number of ways. But really, I'm kind of an external evangelist to the broader market, and speak on a range of topics having to do with local marketing, location-based marketing, and media, and how that impacts enterprises and small business customers. And beyond that, I've got about 20 years in digital marketing, mainly as a researcher and analyst for a number of different firms. Most recently, I was the VP of strategy for what used to be the local search association, which was a trade association of directory publishers and companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and others. And now it's called Locology. And I left in July of last year and joined Uberall in very late last year. So I'm relatively new to the role here.
Excellent. Well, it's a pleasure having you on board today. I think it was Florian Kubner, the founder and CEO of Uberall, joined me on this podcast last year. But of course, the world has changed dramatically since that last conversation. So can you remind everyone listening of exactly what Uberall is and the kind of problems that you're solving for businesses?
Sure. Uberall is a company that helps enterprises and through a network of partners, small businesses, manage their online presence. And it's directed primarily to companies that have a bricks and mortar location, though not 100%. Sometimes there are product sellers who market through retailers or distributors that are included. And there are a number of products in that kind of broader description: business listings management, reputation management. There's a little bit of social media in there in the mix, local ads on Facebook and Google. That's a recently launched product. And there's some other stuff in the pipeline. So it's really right now clustered around location management and reputation. Those are the two kind of twin poles, but there are other pieces in that.
And one of the reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today, because I think we're all at a moment in time where many companies are going to be thinking about how they can bounce back from everything right now and the horrendous start to the year. So in your opinion, what should small to medium-sized businesses and indeed any business be doing right now to hit the ground running and bounce back?
Well, it's an especially challenging proposition for small businesses right now for obvious reasons, especially if you have a physical store, physical location, depending on your category. Money is the number one problem. So having operating capital, most of them have seen their sales go way down or down to zero. Then you've got to think about your employees and your customers in terms of safety, depending on whether you have employees. How do you work with your own employees and enable them to carry out their jobs in a safe way? And then how do you serve your customers similarly? Beyond that, they have to think about diversifying their business models into online. Many small businesses, especially product sellers, have dabbled in e-commerce or have made half-hearted efforts toward e-commerce, but really need to take that much more seriously now and do it in earnest. If you're a business owner that has employees working from home, if you can do that, that creates a set of issues that are sometimes challenging around managing your team, data security, those kinds of things, collaboration and execution. And then, you need to be kind of reconnecting or with your customers. I mean, this is arguably the most important point is connecting, reconnecting, strengthening those relationships, because that's the difference between, survival and failure. And the benefit of being a small business versus a large faceless corporation is that most small business customers want those businesses to survive. They're at the very heart of the community, the high street or the neighborhood, and the customers want to support them and want them to survive. So there's a lot of enthusiasm in most cases for those businesses. So they have that in their favor. But there's a lot of complexity now in kind of going from a lockdown, temporarily closed position to a reopening their businesses. It's a great deal more complicated, I think.
And speaking of being more complicated, what about those multi-location brands? Is there anything that they should be doing differently to weather this crisis?
Yes. Next question. No. It's a sort of a parallel universe in a way. I mean, there's a great deal of overlap in terms of communication and marketing, which we haven't gotten into. But they need to strengthen those customer relationships. They need to communicate with those customers through the various channels that they use, social media, search. They've got a lot of employee issues depending on the category. I mean, I don't know if you've seen any of the discussion about how some of the giant office towers are going to reopen with the idea of one person per elevator. That scenario is just really kind of a nightmare. I think they have their own, they have more resources, they have more support, but they also have a lot of challenges. And if you're a retailer or a restaurant chain, for example, it's going to be quite challenging for you, at least in the beginning now, to get people back into your location. Consumers are going to be concerned about, is it safe? What's the experience going to be like? Is it going to be painful to go there? Is it going to be slow and awkward? I mean, you've read some of the stories about how various retailers are reopening and what the measures that they're taking. And in some cases, it's just going to be more painful and to go to the store than it will be to simply buy the product online. But in the same way that I said that the small businesses need to diversify into e-commerce, retailers and others really need to now have a much more transactional focus on online. They need to do much more with the internet as online and offline become more integrated going forward.
And for people listening outside the world of marketing, can I also ask that you expand on the impact of the crisis and what it's having on digital marketing and how to prepare for a recovery there too, because that's another area that's been almost decimated, isn't it?
So what happened was people reduced their budgets, pulled their advertising, pivoted very quickly. In the case of Uberall, we went from a sort of a longer planning cycle in marketing to 2-week sprints, which is a very different way of working. So I think that businesses now need to focus on moving beyond the kind of crisis mentality that has dominated thinking up until this point. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about recovery, which in some ways is a bit premature, but consumers and the audience broadly, I think, is really tired of the of the virus talk, even though the virus is still very much with us. And so you have to sort of thread a kind of needle between acknowledging the reality of the situation on the ground, which is still quite difficult, but at the same time, sort of offering a message of, you know, hope in some way, you know, fun, relief, enjoyment, pleasure, resumption of normalcy to the extent that that is even possible. And then that has to filter through all your different communication channels. And one of the things that happened when everybody cut their budgets is that it became much cheaper to advertise online. CPMs on Facebook, in some cases, dropped by 50% or more, and by 25 or 30% or more in some cases in paid search marketing. So there was a great opportunity because there was less competition. Now that money is coming back in as people sort of gear up to start marketing again, and it's getting a bit more competitive and costly. But still, there's an opportunity now for companies to advertise, to take advantage of these channels, which are still a bit undersubscribed, and announce their go forward plans. I mean, that's sort of job one, is to say, this is how we're going to be operating going forward. This is what you can expect. Fundamentally, customers are going to want to know what the experience is going to be like, whether it's the restaurant or the retail store or the dentist or the salon or whatever the particular venue is. And that all has to be carefully communicated. And digital marketing itself will recover. I mean, marketers are very resilient and very optimistic, and it's just really a question of budget. So it's a question of sort of, as we move forward, what are the budgets going to look like, and what kinds of choices are people going to have to make internally about where to put their money? You know, times like this can force people to be quite creative and resourceful.
And one area that businesses can focus on, of course, is their often neglected Google My Business presence, which is often set up several years ago and then just left to rot. But I'm curious, what are the biggest mistakes that you see businesses making here?
Well, there are plenty of businesses that haven't claimed their Google My Business profile.
Yeah.
So that's sort of fundamental. But assuming you have, you know, as you suggest with your question, not paying attention to it, neglecting it in one form or another, not fully optimizing it, meaning not filling out all the information, not uploading all the photographs that are relevant, not using Google Posts, not paying attention to Google Q&A. So there's a sort of a full complement of content and optimization tactics that should be taken advantage of. And Posts is one that people don't fully take advantage of. Q&A is one that's heavily neglected, especially by many brands. And that's we can talk about that separately, but that's a kind of a reputation area. Also, it could be a source of leads in some cases. One of the mistakes that companies make is not driving traffic necessarily through to their websites. Even though there's a website link or links, they don't think about Google My Business as a driver of e-commerce. But in fact, it is and can be. You can promote products, you can promote all kinds of things through it, and it will often generate sales, online sales. And that's not a well understood or well exploited aspect of Google My Business. And then another thing I would say is not tracking things. People don't rigorously track behavior, engagement with Google My Business, links coming from, clicks coming from Google My Business. And that results in marketers not fully understanding the role that Google My Business may be playing in their larger marketing success. So I would say taking full advantage of it and then tracking actions coming from Google My Business.
And on that same subject of Google My Business, what are the best practices right now, do you think, for a general SMB audience?
Claim the profile. Hours is right now very important. So having accurate hours information, business attributes such as takeout if you're a restaurant, or delivery, curbside pickup if you're a retailer, using the tools of this platform to fully explain to your customer what your capabilities are. As I mentioned before, Google Posts is a great tool, promotional tool that's free. And that should be used, absolutely. And there's different things that can be done with that. There's a category of COVID posts, which are just health and safety related, but then there are regular Google posts, which you can use to promote anything, events, products, things on your website, announcements, discounts. And then reviews, of course. Reviews are really critical. People have varying levels of attention to reviews. Everybody knows now reviews are important for the obvious reasons. They're also a ranking factor. The obvious reasons being they influence consumer behavior. In some cases, business owners are not responding to them. So they're waiting too long to respond. They're not really looking at them carefully to get feedback on their business or to identify problems. So you really need to pay close attention to reviews and respond to them, within 24 hours, and in some cases more quickly if it's a negative review.
And I'm curious, you're probably having lots of conversations with people and clients at the moment. And what kind of challenges are your clients asking for your help with right now? And are there any trends there? And how are you helping them overcome them?
Well, I think everybody's kind of in the same boat, or has been in the same boat, which is the challenges of the budgetary challenges, the communication challenges with customers. If you have a bricks and mortar location, which is what most of Uberall's customers have, then you're suffering from a loss of business, a loss of revenue. So Uberall has really tried to be a conduit of information to them and best practices. That's one of the things we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of education, a lot of webinars, a lot of content around checklists and best practices and things. We've been doing a lot of forward-looking discussion. Here's what to expect in the next phase. Here are the things to consider. And we've been doing that both for enterprises and for partners who work with small businesses. So we've produced quite a bit of content around both of those segments, and in some cases, vertically specific content. So we've been just trying to stay on top of this and give them the best information that we can. Uberall did create a product for the healthcare segment, and in North America, some of the folks in the restaurant space are using it. It's called Uberall Essential, and it's a modified version of our listings management product that has quite a few features, but not the full feature set. But it's been made available for no charge for a period of time during the crisis. So that's another thing that we're trying to do that is trying to be helpful for some of these hard hit segments or segments in distress.
And what about you guys at Uberall? What have been your biggest challenges over the last few months, and how are you guys overcoming them as well? Because I would imagine you're in pretty much the same boat, but I'm curious if there was anything additional to that.
Well, I mean, certainly, we've continued to have sales during this period, but certainly the challenge of, a lot of B2B companies go to a lot of trade shows, a lot of conferences, and that is one of the primary budget line items and one of the chief ways that people can meet with prospects and close deals and do demos and all that kind of stuff. And it's quite effective. But now it's all vicarious. It's all sort of virtual. And so the absence of events completely has changed the sales process entirely. And that's been a challenge. I'm not a salesperson, but I know that that's been a significant challenge, not just for Uberall, but for us as well. The impact on marketing budgets, that has been significant. Out of caution, everybody has become more conservative, but it's forced us, as I suggested earlier, to become more creative, more resourceful. Everyone is working from home. I'm based in San Francisco, California, and the company is based in Berlin. We have a San Francisco office, and there are multiple offices around the world, but the core of the company is based in Berlin. And I know for them, it's been a challenge because they're used to interacting in person and collaborating in that way, and just having everybody sort of sequestered in their own rooms requires you to work in a different way. And that's sometimes there's greater productivity in some instances, but you also lose something. You lose something when you don't have face-to-face communication, that there's some context that's lost. It's quite different to be on a Zoom call for an hour versus an in-person meeting. Zoom is okay, but better than disembodied voice on the phone, but still not as good as in person. So I think there's some communication challenges, and I think that as we've moved into this sort of sprint agile mode, it's enabled us to get a lot of work done very quickly, but at the same time, there's some ways in which the bigger picture can get lost because people are, working very rapidly on discrete projects, and so that's a challenge there. Everything has its trade-offs.
Well, a huge thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Before I do let you go, could I just ask that you remind listeners of where they can find you online, and also contact your team if they're all left with any questions after our conversation today?
I'm self-conscious. I don't want to end on that negative note. I think you can reach me on Twitter at gstirling, GSTERLING, or directly via email, greg.stirling, greg.stirling at uberall.com. And I don't have a generic Uberall address to give you, so you can just contact me and I can refer anybody if I'm not the appropriate person to speak to. But I just want to say, in addition to thank you for having me on the show, I think, there's two sides to everything, and it is, I think, possible for companies to come out of this crisis with some renewed focus and strength. And it's a challenge, but I think it can be done. And I think that, companies are going to survive this. And hopefully in a couple of years, this will be very much behind us and we'll all be better off.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And like you said, businesses all over the world are being more creative and resourceful as a result, which can only be a good thing too. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'd love to get you back on in 6 months from now and have a much more positive conversation about the future ahead. But more than anything, just thanks for joining me today.
Thanks very much.
So many great points there about Google My Business, the best practices that right now, and how many people are missing that great opportunity, which is relatively easy to fix. And also the impact of the crisis on digital marketing and how to prepare for recovery. Because yes, we all know this year has been difficult and the road ahead can look daunting. But as Greg said, there are so many reasons to not only remain hopeful, but to hit the ground running and turn adversity into an opportunity. And having listened to me here and listening to today's guest, I now want to throw this back to you. How are you doing that? How are you turning adversity into an opportunity and attempting to turn the tide in your favour? Because I honestly think if you can share how you're doing this and I share it with everybody listening, maybe we can all learn from each other and overcome those challenges together. Yes, it's a little bit cheesy, but I was a man raised on cheesy 80s movies, and that's why I am what I am. And I make no apologies. So keep those messages coming in. Techblogwriter at outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes, and LinkedIn as well. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So let's keep things nice and positive. I'll join you again tomorrow with another shot of positivity and another story of how somebody is leveraging technology to make a real difference and transform their fortunes. So all that's left for me to say, of course, is thanks for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.